Hello again out there, folks. Thanks for stopping by. Continuing on the Wuthering Heights journey, I'll be kicking off Chapter 10 in Volume 1 today. Intrigued to see where this goes. Intrigued to see how far I can actually get in this sitting. But thanks for coming in. Remember to like and subscribe, all that fun stuff. But most importantly, when we leave here today, remember to have a great rest of the day or night, whenever and wherever you are out there. Take care. Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Volume 1, Chapter 10. A charming introduction to a hermit's life. 4 weeks' torture, tossing, and sickness. Oh, these bleak winds and bitter northern skies and impassable roads and dilatory country surgeons. And oh, this dearth of the human physiognomy, and worse than all, the terrible intimation of Kenneth that I need not expect to be out of doors till spring. Mr. Heathcliff has just honored me with a call. About 7 days ago he sent me a brace of grouse, the last of the season. Scoundrel! He is not altogether guiltless in this illness of mine, and that I had a great mind to tell him. But alas! How could I offend a man who is charitable enough to sit at my bedside a good hour and talk on some other subject than pills and draughts, blisters and leeches? This is quite an easy interval. I am too weak to read, yet I feel as if I could enjoy something interesting. Why not have up Mrs. Dean to finish her tale? I can recollect its chief incidents as far as she had gone. Yes, I remember her hero had run off and never been heard of for 3 years, and the heroine was married. I'll ring. She'll be delighted to find me capable of talking cheerfully. Mrs. Dean came. "It wants 20 minutes, sir, to taking the medicine," she commenced. Away with it," I replied. "I desire to have—" "The doctor says you must drop the powders." "With all my heart. Don't interrupt me. Come and take your seat here. Keep your fingers from that bitter phalanx of vials. Draw your knitting out of your pocket. That will do. Now continue the history of Mr. Heathcliff from where you left off to the present day. Did he finish his education on the continent and come back a gentleman? Or did he get a sire's palace at college? Or escape to America and earn honors by drawing blood from his foster country? Or make a fortune more promptly on the English highways? He may have done a little in all these vocations, Mr. Lockwood, but I couldn't give my word for any. I stated before that I didn't know how he gained his money, neither am I aware of the means he took to raise his mind from the savage ignorance into which it was sunk. But, with your leave, I'll proceed in my own fashion if you think it will amuse, and not weary you. Are you feeling better this morning?" "Much." "Well, that's good news." I got Miss Catherine and myself to Thrushcross Grange, and to my agreeable disappointment she behaved infinitely better than I dared to expect. She seemed almost over-fond of Mr. Linton, and even to his sister she showed plenty of affection. They were both very attentive to her comforts, certainly. It was not the thorn bending to the honeysuckles, but the honeysuckles embracing the thorn. There were no mutual concessions. One stood erect, and the others yielded. And who can be ill-natured and bad-tempered when they encounter neither opposition nor indifference? I observed that Mr. Edgar had a deep-rooted fear of ruffling her humor. He concealed it from her, but if ever he heard me answer sharply or saw any other servant grow cloudy at some imperious order of hers, he would show his trouble by a frown of displeasure that never darkened on his own account. He, many a time, spoke sternly to me about my pertness, and averred that the stab of a knife could not inflict a worse pang than he suffered at seeing his lady vexed. Not to grieve a kind master, I learnt to be less touchy, and, for the space of half a year, the gunpowder lay as harmless as sand, because no fire came near to explode it. Catherine had seasons of gloom and silence now and then. They were respected with sympathizing silence by her husband, who ascribed them to an alteration in her constitution, produced by her perilous illness, as she was never subject to depression of spirits before. The return of sunshine was welcomed by answering sunshine from him. I believe I may assert that they were really in possession of deep and growing happiness. It ended, well,
We must be ourselves in the long run. The mild and generous are only more justly selfish than the domineering, and it ended when circumstances caused each to feel that the one's interest was not the chief consideration in the other's thoughts. On a mellow evening in September, I was coming from the garden with a heavy basket of apples which I had been gathering. It had got dusk, and the moon looked over the high wall of the court, causing undefined shadows to lurk in the corners of the numerous projecting portions of the building. I set my burden on the house steps by the kitchen door, and lingered to rest, and draw in a few more breaths of the soft, sweet air. My eyes were on the moon, and my back to the entrance, when I heard a voice behind me say, "Nellie, is that you?" It was a deep voice, and foreign in tone. Yet there was something in the manner of pronouncing my name which made it sound familiar. I turned about to discover who spoke fearfully, for the doors were shut, and I had seen nobody on approaching the steps. Something stirred in the porch, and moving nearer, I distinguished a tall man dressed in dark clothes with dark face and hair. He leant against the side and held his fingers on the latch as if intending to open for himself. Who can it be? I thought. Mr. Earnshaw? Oh, no. The voice has no resemblance to his. I have waited here an hour, he resumed, while I continued staring, and the whole of that time all round has been as still as death. I dared not enter. You do not know me? Look, I'm not a stranger. A ray fell on his features. The cheeks were sallow and half covered with black whiskers, the brows lowering, the eyes deep and set singular. I remembered the eyes. "What?" I cried, uncertain whether to regard him as a worldly visitor, and I raised my hands in amazement. "What? You come back? Is it really you, is it?" "Yes, Heathcliff," he replied, glancing from me up to the windows, which reflected a score of glittering moons, but showed no lights from within. "Are they at home? Where is she? Nellie, you are not glad? You needn't be so disturbed. Is she here? Speak! I want to have one word with her, your mistress. Go and say some person from Gimmerton desires to see her." "How will she take it?" I exclaimed. "What will she do? The surprise bewilders me. It will put her out of her head. And you are Heathcliff, but altered. Nay, there's no comprehending it. Have you been a soldier?" "Go and carry my message," he interrupted impatiently. "I'm in hell till you do." He lifted the latch, and I entered. But when I got to the parlor where Mr. and Mrs. Linton were, I could not persuade myself to proceed. At length, I resolved on making an excuse to ask if they would have the candles lighted, and I opened the door. They sat together in a window whose lattice lay back against the wall, and displayed beyond the garden trees and the wild green park the valley of Gimmerton, with a long line of mist winding nearly to its top. For very soon after you pass the chapel, as you may have noticed, the sow that runs from the marshes joins a beck which follows the head of the glen. Wuthering Heights rose above this silvery vapor, but our old house was invisible. It rather dips down on the other side. Both the room and its occupants and the scene they gazed on looked wondrously peaceful. I shrank reluctantly from performing my errand, and was actually going away, leaving it unsaid, after having put my question about the candles, when a sense of my folly compelled me to return and mutter, "A person from Gimmerton wishes to see you, ma'am." "What does he want?" asked Mrs. Linton. "I did not question him," I answered. "Well, close the curtains, Nellie," she said, "and bring up tea. I'll be back again directly." She quitted the apartment. Mr. Edgar inquired carelessly who it was. "Some one the mistress does not expect," I replied. "That Heathcliff, you recollect him, sir, who used to live at Mr. Earnshaw's." "What? The gypsy? The ploughboy?" he cried. "Why did you not say so, Catherine?" "Hush! You must not call him by those names, master," I said. "She'd be sadly grieved to hear you. She was nearly heartbroken when he ran off. I guess his return will make a jubilee to her." Mr. Linton walked to a window on the other side of the room that overlooked the court. He unfastened it and leaned out. I suppose they were below, for he exclaimed quickly, "Don't stand there, love. Bring the person in, if it be any one particular." Ere long I heard the click of the latch, and Catherine flew upstairs, breathless and wild, too excited to show gladness. Indeed, by her face, you would rather have surmised an awful calamity. "Oh, Edgar, Edgar!" she panted, flinging her arms round his neck. "Oh, Edgar, darling, Heathcliff's come back, he is!" And she tightened her embrace to a squeeze. "Well, well," cried her husband crossly, "don't strangle me for that. He never struck me as such a marvelous treasure. There is no need to be frantic." "I know you didn't like him," she answered, repressing a little the intensity of her delight. "Yet for my sake you must be friends now. Shall I tell him to come up?" "Here," he said, "into the parlor." "Where else?" she asked. He looked vexed and suggested the kitchen as a more suitable place for him. Mrs. Linton eyed him with a droll expression, half angry, half laughing at his fastidiousness. "No," she added after a while, "I cannot sit in the kitchen. Set 2 tables here, Ellen, one for your master and Miss Isabella, being gentry, the other for Heathcliff and myself, being of the lower orders. Will that please you, dear, or must I have a fire lighted elsewhere? If so, give directions. I'll run down and secure my guest. I'm afraid the joy is too great to be real." She was about to dart off again, but Edgar arrested her. "You bid him step up," he said, addressing me. "And Catherine, try to be glad without being absurd. The whole household need not witness the sight of your welcoming a runaway servant as a brother." I descended and found Heathcliff waiting. He followed my guidance without waste of words, and I ushered him into the presence of the master and mistress, whose flushed cheeks betrayed signs of warm talking. But the lady's glowed with another feeling when her friend appeared at the door. She sprang forward, took both his hands, and led him to Linton, and then she seized Linton's reluctant fingers and crushed them into his. Now fully revealed by the fire and candlelight, I was amazed, more than ever, to behold the transformation of Heathcliff. He had grown a tall, athletic, well-formed man, beside whom my master seemed quite slender and youth-like. His upright carriage suggested the idea of his having been in the army. His countenance was much older in expression and decision of feature than Mr. Linton's. It looked intelligent, and retained no marks of former degradation. A half-civilized ferocity lurked yet in the depressed brows, and eyes full of black fire, but it was subdued, and his manner was even dignified, quite divested of roughness, though too stern for grace. My master's surprise equaled or exceeded mine. He remained for a minute at a loss how to address the ploughboy, as he had called him. Heathcliff dropped his slight hand and stood looking at him coolly till he chose to speak. "Sit down, sir," he said at length. "Mrs. Linton, recalling old times, would have me give you a cordial reception, and, of course, I am gratified when anything occurs to please her." "And I also," answered Heathcliff, "especially if it be anything in which I have a part. I shall stay an hour or 2 willingly." He took a seat opposite Catherine, who kept her gaze fixed on him as if she feared he would vanish were she to remove it. He did not raise his to her often. A quick glance now and then sufficed, but it flashed back each time more confidently the undisguised delight he drank from hers. They were too much absorbed in their mutual joy to suffer embarrassment. Not so Mr. Edgar. He grew pale with pure annoyance, a feeling that reached its climax when his lady rose and, stepping across the rug, seized Heathcliff's hands and laughed like one beside herself. "I shall think it a dream tomorrow," she cried. "I shall not be able to believe that I have seen and touched and spoken to you once more. And yet, cruel Heathcliff, you don't deserve this welcome. To be absent and silent for 3 years, and never to think of me?" "A little more than you have thought of me," he murmured. "I heard of your marriage, Cathy, not long since, and while waiting in the yard below, I meditated this plan, just to have one glimpse of your face, a stare of surprise, perhaps, and pretended pleasure, afterwards settle my score with Hindley, and then prevent the law by doing execution on myself. Your welcome has put these ideas out of my mind, but beware of meeting me with another aspect next time. Nay, you'll not drive me off again. You were really sorry for me, were you? Well, there was cause. I fought through a bitter life since I last heard your voice, and you must forgive me, for I struggled only for you. Catherine, unless we are to have cold tea, please to come to the table interrupted Linton, striving to preserve his ordinary tone and a due measure of politeness. Mr. Heathcliff will have a long walk, wherever he may lodge tonight, and I'm thirsty. She took her post before the urn, and Miss Isabella came, summoned by the bell. Then, having handed their chairs forward, I left the room. The meal hardily endured 10 minutes. Catherine's cup was never filled. She could neither eat nor drink. Edgar had made a slop in his saucer, and scarcely swallowed a mouthful. Their guest did not protract his stay that evening above an hour longer. I asked, as he departed, if he went to Gimmerton. "No, to Wuthering Heights," he answered. "Mr. Earnshaw invited me when I called this morning." Mr. Earnshaw invited him, and he called on Mr. Earnshaw. I pondered this sentence painfully after he was gone. Is he turning out a bit of a hypocrite and coming into the country to work mischief under a cloak? I mused. I had a presentiment in the bottom of my heart that he had better have remained away. About the middle of the night, I was wakened from my first nap by Mrs. Linton gliding into my chamber, taking a seat on my bedside and pulling me by the hair to rouse me. "I cannot rest, Ellen," she said by way of apology, "and I want some living creature to keep me company in my happiness. Edgar is sulking because I'm glad of a thing that does not interest him. He refuses to open his mouth except to utter pettish, silly speeches, and he affirmed I was cruel and selfish for wishing to talk when he was so sick and sleepy. He always contrives to be sick at the least cross. I gave a few sentences of commendation to Heathcliff, and he, either for a headache or a pang of envy, began to cry. So I got up and left him. "What use is it praising Heathcliff to him?" I answered. "As lads, they had an aversion to each other, and Heathcliff would hate just as much to hear him praised. It's human nature. Let Mr. Linton alone about him, unless you would like an open quarrel between them." "But does it not show great weakness?" pursued she. "I'm not envious. I never feel hurt at the brightness of Isabella's yellow hair, and the whiteness of her skin, at her dainty elegance and the fondness all the family exhibit for her. Even you, Nelly, if we have a dispute sometimes, you back Isabella at once, and I yield like a foolish mother. I call her a darling and flatter her into a good temper. It pleases her brother to see us cordial, and that pleases me. But they are very much alike. They are spoiled children, and fancy the world was made for their accommodation. And though I humor both, I think a smart chastisement might improve them all the same." "You're mistaken, Mrs. Linton," said I. "They humor you. I know what there would be to do if they did not. You can well afford to indulge their passing whims as long as their business is to anticipate all your desires. You may, however, fall out at last over something of equal consequence to both sides. And then those you term weak are very capable of being as obstinate as you." "And then we shall fight to the death, shan't we, Nelly?" she returned, laughing. "No, I tell you I have such faith in Linton's love that I believe I might kill him and he wouldn't wish to retaliate." I advised her to value him the more for his affection. "I do," she answered, "but he needn't resort to whining for trifles. It is childish, and instead of melting into tears, because I said that Heathcliff was now worthy of anyone's regard, and it would honor the first gentleman in the country to be his friend. He ought to have said it for me, and been delighted from sympathy. He must get accustomed to him, and he may as well like him, considering how Heathcliff has reason to object to him. I'm sure he behaved excellently." "What do you think of his going to Wuthering Heights?" I inquired. "He is reformed in every respect, apparently quite a Christian, offering the right hand of fellowship to his enemies all round." "He explained it," she replied. "I wonder as much as you. He said he called to gather information concerning me from you, supposing you resided there still. And Joseph told Hindley, who came out and fell to questioning him of what he had been doing, and how he had been living, and finally desired him to walk in. There were some persons sitting at cards. Heathcliff joined them. My brother lost some money to him, and finding him plentifully supplied, he requested that he would come again in the evening, to which he consented. Hindley is too reckless to select his acquaintance prudently. He doesn't trouble himself to reflect on the causes he might have for mistrusting one whom he has basely injured. But Heathcliff affirms his principal reason for resuming a connection with his ancient persecutor is a wish to install himself in quarters at walking distance from the Grange, and an attachment to the house where we lived together, and likewise a hope that I shall have more opportunities of seeing him there than I can have if he settled in Gimmerton. He means to offer liberal payment for permission to lodge at the Heights, and doubtless my brother's covetousness will prompt him to accept the terms. He was always greedy, though what he grasps with one hand he flings away with the other. It's a nice place for a young man to fix his dwelling in, said I. Have you no fear of the consequences, Mrs. Linton? None for my friend, she replied. His strong head will keep him from danger. A little for Hindley, but he can't be made morally worse than he is, and I stand between him and bodily harm. The event of this evening has reconciled me to God and humanity. I had risen in angry rebellion against Providence. Oh, I have endured very, very bitter misery, Nellie. If that creature knew how bitter, he'd be ashamed to cloud its removal with idle petulance. It was kindness for him which induced me to bear it alone. And had I expressed the agony I frequently felt, he would have been taught to long for its alleviation as ardently as I. However, it's over, and I'll take no revenge on his folly. I can afford to suffer anything hereafter. Should the meanest thing alive slap me on the cheek, I'd not only turn the other, but I'd ask pardon for provoking it, and as a proof, I'll go make my peace with Edgar instantly. Good night. I'm an angel. In this self-complacent conviction she departed, and the success of her fulfilled resolution was obvious on the morrow. Mr. Linton had not only abjured his peevishness, though his spirit seemed still subdued by Catherine's exuberance of vivacity, but he ventured no objection to her taking Isabella with her to Wuthering Heights in the afternoon, and she rewarded him with such a summer of sweetness and affection in return as made the house a paradise for several days, both master and servants profiting from the perpetual sunshine. Heathcliff, Mr. Heathcliff, I should say in the future, used the liberty of visiting Thrushcross Grange cautiously at first. He seemed estimating how far its owner would bear his intrusion. Catherine also deemed it judicious to moderate her expressions of pleasure in receiving him, and he gradually established his right to be expected. He retained a great deal of the reserve for which his boyhood was remarkable, and that served to repress all startling demonstrations of feeling. My master's uneasiness experienced a lull, and further circumstances diverted it into another channel for a space. His new source of trouble sprang from the not anticipated misfortune of Isabella Linton evincing a sudden and irresistible attraction toward the tolerated guest. She was at that time a charming young lady of 18, infantile in manners, though possessed of keen wit, keen feelings, and a keen temper, too, if irritated. Her brother, who loved her tenderly, was appalled at this fantastic preference. Leaving aside the degradation of an alliance with a nameless man, and the possible fact that his property, in default of heirs male, might pass into such a one's power, he had sense to comprehend Heathcliff's disposition, to know that, though his exterior was altered, his mind was unchangeable and unchanged, and he dreaded that mind. It revolted him, yet he shrank forebodingly from the idea of committing Isabella to its keeping. He would have recoiled still more had he been aware that her attachment rose unsolicited, and was bestowed where it awakened no reciprocation of sentiment. For the minute he discovered its existence, he laid the blame on Heathcliff's deliberate designing. We had all remarked, during some time, that Miss Linton fretted and pined over something. She grew cross and wearisome, snapping at and teasing Catherine continually, at the imminent risk of exhausting her limited patience. We excused her to a certain extent, on the plea of ill health. She was dwindling and fading before our eyes. But one day, when she had been peculiarly wayward, rejecting her breakfast, complaining that the servants did not do what she told them, that the mistress would allow her to be nothing in the house, and Edgar neglected her, that she had caught a cold with the doors being left open, and we let the parlor fire go out on purpose to vex her. With 100 yet more frivolous accusations, Mrs. Linton peremptorily insisted that she should get to bed, and having scolded her heartily, threatened to send for the doctor. Mention of Kenneth caused her to exclaim instantly that her health was perfect, and it was only Catherine's harshness which made her unhappy. "How could you say I am harsh, you naughty fondling?" cried the mistress, amazed at the unreasonable assertion. "You are surely losing your reason. When have I been harsh? Tell me." "Yesterday," sobbed Isabella, "and now." "Yesterday," said her sister-in-law. "On what occasion?" "In our walk along the moor. You told me to ramble where I pleased while you sauntered on with Mr. Heathcliff." "And that's your notion of harshness," said Catherine, laughing. "It was no hint that your company was superfluous. We didn't care whether you kept with us or not. I merely thought Heathcliff's talk would have nothing entertaining for your ears." "Oh, no," wept the young lady. "You wished me away because you knew I liked to be there." "Is she sane?" asked Mrs. Linton, appealing to me. "I'll repeat our conversation word for word, Isabella, and you point out any charm it could have had for you." "I don't mind the conversation," she answered. "I wanted to be with—" "Well," said Catherine, perceiving her hesitation to complete the sentence, "with him. And I won't be always sent off," she continued, kindling up. "You are a dog in the manger, Cathy, and desire no one to be loved but yourself." "You are an impertinent little monkey," exclaimed Mrs. Linton in surprise. "But I'll not believe this idiocy. It is impossible that you can covet the admiration of Heathcliff, that you can consider him an agreeable person. I hope I have misunderstood you, Isabella." "No, you have not," said the infatuated girl. "I love him more than ever you loved Edgar, and he might love me if you would let him." "I wouldn't be you for a kingdom, then," Catherine declared emphatically, and she seemed to speak sincerely. "Nellie, help me to convince her of her madness. Tell her what Heathcliff is: an unreclaimed creature without refinement, without cultivation, an arid wilderness of firs and whinstone. I'd as soon put that little canary into the park on a winter's day as recommend you to bestow your heart on him. It's deplorable ignorance of his character, child, and nothing else, which makes that dream enter your head. Pray don't imagine that he conceals depths of benevolence and affection beneath a stern exterior. He's not a rough diamond, a pearl-containing oyster of a rustic. He's a fierce, pitiless, wolfish man. I never say to him, 'Let this or that enemy alone,' because it would be ungenerous or cruel to harm them. I say, 'Let them alone because I should hate them to be wronged.' And he'd crush you, like a sparrow's egg, Isabella, if he found you a troublesome charge. I know he couldn't love a Linton, and yet he'd be quite capable of marrying your fortune and expectations. Avarice is growing with him a besetting sin. There's my picture, and I'm his friend, so much so that had he thought seriously to catch you, I should perhaps have held my tongue and let you fall into his trap." Miss Linton regarded her sister-in-law with indignation. "For shame! For shame!" she repeated angrily. "You are worse than 20 foes, you poisonous friend." "Ah, you won't believe me then," said Catherine. "You think I speak from wicked selfishness." "I'm certain you do," retorted Isabella, "and I shudder at you." "Good," cried the other. "Try for yourself, if that be your spirit. I have done, and yield the argument to your saucy insolence." "And I must suffer for her egotism," she sobbed, as Mrs. Linton left the room. All is against me. She has blighted my single consolation." "But she uttered falsehoods, didn't she? Mr. Heathcliff is not a fiend. He has an honorable soul, and a true one, or how could he remember her?" "Banish him from your thoughts, miss," I said. "He's a bird of bad omen, no mate for you." Mrs. Linton spoke strongly, and yet I can't contradict her. She is better acquainted with his heart than I, or any one besides, and she never would represent him as worse than he is. Honest people don't hide their deeds. How has he been living? How has he got rich? Why is he staying at Wuthering Heights, the house of a man whom he abhors? They say Mr. Earnshaw is worse and worse since he came. They sit up all night together continually, and Henley has been borrowing money on his land, and does nothing but play and drink. I heard only a week ago it was Joseph who told me. I met him at Gimmerton. "Nellie," he said, "we's hae a crown's questionnaire. At art, folks, one on 'em's almost getting his fingers cut off, but holding together fro sticking his in like a cough. That's Meister, you know. What's so up going to grand sizes? He's none furred, no bench, no judges. Nor Paul, nor Peter, nor Paul, nor Matthew, nor knowing him, nor he. He fares like he longs to set his brazen face against him. And yon boony lad Heathcliff, ye mind, he's a rare un. He can garn a laugh, as well as anybody wrought devil's jest. Does he never say naught of his fine living amongst us, when he goes to the Grange? This is the way on't, up at Sandang, dice, brandy, close shutters, and can't let the light next day, at noon. 10. The fool gangs baning and raving to his charmer, making decent folks dig their fingers, out their lungs for very shame. On the knave, why he can't can his brass, and ate and slept, and off to his neighbours to gossip with wife. Aye, of course, he tells Dame Catherine how her father's good runs into his pocket, and her son's father gallops down Broad Street, while he flees afore to open the pikes. Now, Miss Linton, Joseph is an old rascal, but no liar, and if his account of Heathcliff's conduct be true, you would never think of desiring such a husband, would you? You are leagued with the rest, Ellen, she replied. I'll not listen to your slanders. What malevolence you must have to wish to convince me that there is no happiness in the world. Whether she would have got over this fancy if left to herself, or persevered in nursing it perpetually, I cannot say. She had little time to reflect. The day after, there was a justice meeting at the next town. My master was obliged to attend, and Mr. Heathcliff, aware of his absence, called rather earlier than usual. Catherine and Isabella were sitting in the library on hostile terms, but silent. The latter alarmed at her recent indiscretion and the disclosures she had made of her secret feelings in a transient fit of passion. The former, on mature consideration, really offended with her companion, and, if she laughed again at her pertness, inclined to make it no laughing matter to her. She did laugh as she saw Heathcliff pass the window. I was sweeping the hearth, and I noticed a mischievous smile on her lips. Isabella, absorbed in her meditations or a book, remained till the door opened, and it was too late to attempt an escape, which she would gladly have done had it been practicable. "Come in, that's right," exclaimed the mistress gaily, pulling a chair to the fire. "Here are two people sadly in need of a third to thaw the ice between them, and you are the very one we should both of us choose. Heathcliff, I'm proud to show you at last somebody that dotes on you more than myself. I expect you to feel flattered. Nay, it's not Nellie. Don't look at her. My poor little sister-in-law is breaking her heart by mere contemplation of your physical and moral beauty. It lies in your own power to be Edgar's brother. No, no, Isabella, you shan't run off," she continued, arresting with feigned playfulness the confounded girl, who had risen indignantly. "We were quarreling like cats about you, Heathcliff, and I was fairly beaten in protestations of devotion and admiration, and moreover I was informed that if I would have the manners to stand aside, my rival, as she will have herself to be, would shoot a shaft into your soul that would fix you forever and send my image into eternal oblivion." "Catherine," said Isabella, calling up her dignity and disdaining to struggle from the tight grasp that held her, "I thank you to adhere to the truth and not slander me even in joke. Mr. Heathcliff, be kind enough to bid this friend of yours release me. She forgets that you and I are not intimate acquaintances, and what amuses her is painful to me beyond expression." As the guest answered nothing, but took his seat and looked thoroughly indifferent what sentiments she cherished concerning him, she turned and whispered an earnest appeal for liberty to her tormentor. "By no means," cried Mrs. Linton in answer. "I won't be named a dog in the manger again. You shall stay. Now then, Heathcliff, why don't you evince satisfaction at my pleasant news? Isabella swears that the love Edgar has for me is nothing to that she entertains for you. I'm sure she made some speech of the kind, did she not, Ellen? And she has fasted ever since the day before yesterday's walk, from sorrow and rage that I dispatched her out of your society, under the idea of its being unacceptable." "I think you belie her," said Heathcliff, twisting his chair to face them. "She wishes to be out of my society now, at any rate." And he stared hard at the object of discourse, as one might do at a strange, repulsive animal, a centipede from the Indies, for instance, which curiosity leads one to examine in spite of the aversion it raises. The poor thing couldn't bear that. She grew white and red in rapid succession, and while tears beaded her lashes, bent the strength of her small fingers to loosen the firm clutch of Catherine, and perceiving that, as fast as she raised one finger off her arm, another closed down, and she could not remove the whole together, she began to make use of her nails, and their sharpness presently ornamented the detainers with crescents of red. "There's a tigress!" exclaimed Mrs. Linton, setting her free and shaking her hand with pain. "Begone, for God's sake, and hide your vixen face. How foolish to reveal those talons to him! Can't you fancy the conclusions he'll draw? Look, Heathcliff, they are instruments that will do execution. You must beware of your eyes." "I'd wrench them off her fingers if they ever menaced me," he answered brutally, when the door had closed after her. "But what did you mean by teasing the creature in that manner, Cathy? You were not speaking the truth, were you?" "I assure you I was," she returned. "She has been pining for your sake several weeks, and raving about you this morning, and pouring forth a deluge of abuse, because I represented your failings in a plain light for the purpose of mitigating her adoration. But don't notice it further. I wish to punish her sauciness, that's all. I like her too well, my dear Heathcliff, to let you absolutely seize and devour her up." "And I like her too ill to attempt it," said he, "except in a very ghoulish fashion. You'd hear of odd things if I lived alone with that mawkish waxen face. The most ordinary would be painting on its white the colors of the rainbow and turning the blue eyes black every day or two. They detestably resemble Linton's." "Delectably," observed Catherine. "They are dove's eyes, angels. She's her brother's heir, is she not?" he asked, after a brief silence. "I should be sorry to think so," returned his companion. "Half a dozen nephews shall erase her title, please heaven. Abstract your mind from the subject at present. You are too prone to covet your neighbor's goods. Remember, this neighbor's goods are mine." "If they were mine, they would be none the less that," said Heathcliff. "But though Isabella Linton may be silly, she is scarcely mad, and, in short, will dismiss the matter as you advise." From their tongues they did dismiss it, and Catherine probably from her thoughts. The other, I felt certain, recalled it often in the course of the evening. I saw him smile to himself, grin, rather, and lapse into ominous musing whenever Mrs. Linton had occasion to be absent from the apartment. I determined to watch his movements. My heart invariably cleaved to the master's in preference to Catherine's side, with reason, I imagine, for he was kind and trustful and honorable, and she could not be called the opposite, yet she seemed to allow herself such wide latitude that I had little faith in her principles, and still less sympathy for her feelings. I wanted something to happen which might have the effect of freeing both Wuthering Heights and the Grange of Mr. Heathcliff quietly, leaving us as we had been prior to his advent. His visits were a continual nightmare to me, and, I suspected, to my master also. His abode at the Heights was an oppression past explaining. I felt that God had forsaken the stray sheep there to its own wicked wanderings, and an evil beast prowled between it and the fold, waiting his time to spring and destroy. Chapter 11. Sometimes, while meditating on these things in solitude, I've got up in a sudden terror, and put on my bonnet to go see how all was at the farm. I persuaded my conscience that it was a duty to warn him how people talked regarding his ways, and then I've recollected his confirmed bad habits, and hopeless of benefiting him, have flinched from re-entering the dismal house, doubting if I could bear to be taken at my word. One time I passed the old gate going out of my way on a journey to Gimmerton. It was about the period that my narrative has reached, a bright, frosty afternoon, the ground bare, and the road hard and dry. I came to a stone where the highway branches off onto the moor at your left hand, a rough sand pillar with the letters W.H. cut on its north side, on the east G, and on the southwest T.G. It serves as guideposts to the Grange and Heights and village. The sun shone yellow on its gray head, reminding me of summer, and I cannot say why, but all at once a gush of child's sensations flowed into my heart. Hindley and I held at a favorite spot 20 years before. I gazed long at the weather-worn block, and stooping down perceived a hole near the bottom, still full of snail shells and pebbles, which we were fond of storing there with more perishable things, and as fresh as reality. It appeared that I beheld my early playmate seated on the withered turf, his dark, square head bent forward, and his little hand scooping out the earth with a piece of slate. "Poor Henley!" I exclaimed involuntarily. I started. My bodily eye was cheated into a momentary belief that the child lifted its face and stared straight into mine. It vanished in a twinkling, but immediately I felt an irresistible yearning to be at the heights. Superstition urged me to comply with this impulse, supposing he should be dead. I thought, or should die soon, supposing it were a sign of death. The nearer I got to the house, the more agitated I grew, and on catching sight of it I trembled every limb. The apparition had outstripped me. It stood looking through the gate. That was my first idea on observing an elf-locked, brown-eyed boy setting his ruddy countenance against the bars. Further reflection suggested this must be Hareton, my Hareton, not altered greatly since I left him 10 months since. "God bless thee, darling!" I cried, forgetting instantly my foolish tears. "Hareton, it's Nellie, Nellie, thy nurse!" He retreated out of arm's length and picked up a large flint. "I am come to see thy father, Hareton," I added, guessing from the action that Nellie, if she lived in his memory at all, was not recognized as one with me. He raised his missile to hurl it. I commenced a soothing speech, but could not stay his hand. The stone struck my bonnet, and then ensued, from the stammering lips of the little fellow, a string of curses which, whether he comprehended them or not, were delivered with practised emphasis and distorted his baby features into a shocking expression of malignity. You may be certain this grieved, more than angered me. Fit to cry, I took an orange from my pocket and offered it to propitiate him. He hesitated and then snatched it from my hold, as if he fancied I only intended to tempt and disappoint him. I showed another, keeping it out of his reach. "Who has taught you those fine words, my bairn?" I inquired. "The curate?" "Damn the curate, and thee! Give me that," he replied. "Tell us where you got your lessons, and you shall have it," said I. "Who's your master?" "Devil Daddy," was his answer. "And what do you learn from Daddy?" I continued. He jumped at the fruit. I raised it higher. "What does he teach you?" I asked. "Naught," said he, "but to keep out of his gate. Daddy cannot bide me because I swear at him." "Aye, and the devil teaches you to swear at Daddy," I observed. "Aye, nay," he drawled. "Well, who then?" "Heathcliff." I asked if he liked Mr. Heathcliff. "Aye," he answered again. Desiring to have his reasons for liking him, I could only gather the sentences. "I know it. He pays Dad back what he gives to me. He curses Daddy for cursing me. He says I mun do as I will." "And the curate does not teach you to read and write, then?" I pursued. "No, I was told the curate should have his teeth dashed down his throat if he stepped over the threshold. Heathcliff had promised that." I put the orange in his hand and bade him tell his father that a woman named Nellie Dean was waiting to speak with him by the garden gate. He went up the walk and entered the house, but instead of Henley, Heathcliff appeared on the door stones, and I turned directly and ran down the road as hard as ever I could race, making no halt till I gained the guidepost, and feeling as scared as if I had raised a goblin. This is not much connected with Miss Isabella's affair, except that it urged me to resolve further on mounting vigilant guard, and doing my utmost to check the spread of such bad influence at the Grange, even though I should wake a domestic storm by thwarting Mrs. Linton's pleasure. The next time Heathcliff came, my young lady chanced to be feeding some pigeons in the court. She had never spoken a word to her sister-in-law for 3 days, but she had likewise dropped her fretful complaining, and we found it a great comfort. Heathcliff had not the habit of bestowing a single unnecessary civility on Miss Linton, I knew. Now, as soon as he beheld her, his first precaution was to take a sweeping survey of the house front. I was standing by the kitchen window, but I drew out of sight. He then stepped across the pavement to her and said something. She seemed embarrassed and desirous of getting away. To prevent it, he laid his hand on her arm. She averted her face. He apparently put some question which she had no mind to answer. There was another rapid glance at the house, and supposing himself unseen, the scoundrel had the impudence to embrace her. "Judas, traitor!" I ejaculated. "You are a hypocrite too, are you, a deliberate deceiver?" "Who is, Nellie?" said Catherine's voice at my elbow. I had been over intent on watching the pair outside to mark her entrance. "Your worthless friend," I answered warmly. "The sneaking rascal yonder. Ah, he has caught a glimpse of us. He is coming in. I wonder, will he have the art to find a plausible excuse for making love to Miss when he told you he hated her?" Mrs. Linton saw Isabella tear herself free and run into the garden a minute after Heathcliff opened the door. I couldn't withhold giving some loose to my indignation, but Catherine angrily insisted on silence, and threatened to order me out of the kitchen, if I dared to be so presumptuous as to put in my insolent tongue. "To hear you, people might think you were the mistress," she cried. "You want setting down in your right place. Heathcliff, what are you about, raising this stir? I said you must let Isabella alone." "I beg you will, unless you are tired of being received here and wish Linton to draw the bolts against you." "God forbid that he should try," answered the black villain. I detested him just then. "God keep him meek and patient. Every day I grow madder after sending him to heaven." "Hush!" said Catherine, shutting the inner door. "Don't vex me. Why have you disregarded my request? Did she come across you on purpose?" "What is it to you?" he growled. "I have a right to kiss her, if she chooses, and you have no right to object. I'm not your husband. You needn't be jealous of me." "I'm not jealous of you," replied the mistress. "I'm jealous for you. Clear your face. You shan't scowl at me. If you like Isabella, you shall marry her. But do you like her? Tell the truth, Heathcliff. There, you won't answer. I'm certain you don't." "And would Mr. Linton approve of his sister marrying that man?" I inquired. "Mr. Linton should approve," returned my lady decisively. "He might spare himself the trouble," said Heathcliff. "I could do as well without his approbation. And as to you, Catherine, I have a mind to speak a few words now while we are at it. I want you to be aware that I know you have treated me infernally. Infernally! Do you hear? And if you flatter yourself that I don't perceive it, you are a fool. And if you think I can be consoled by sweet words, you are an idiot. And if you fancy I'll suffer unrevenged, I'll convince you of the contrary in a very little while. Meantime, thank you for telling me your sister-in-law's secret. I swear I'll make the most of it and stand you aside." "What new phase of his character is this?" exclaimed Mrs. Linton in amazement. "I've treated you infernally, and you'll take revenge. How will you take it, ungrateful brute? How have I treated you infernally?" "I seek no revenge on you," replied Heathcliff less vehemently. "That's not the plan. The tyrant grinds down his slaves, and they don't turn against him. They crush those beneath them. You are welcome to torture me to death for your amusement. Only allow me to amuse myself a little in the same style, and refrain from insult as much as you are able. Having leveled my palace, don't erect a hovel and complacently admire your own charity in giving me that for a home. If I imagined you really wished me to marry Isabella, I'd cut my throat." "Oh, the evil is that I am not jealous, is it?" cried Catherine. "Well, I won't repeat my offer of a wife. It is as bad as offering Satan a lost soul. Your bliss lies, like this, in inflicting misery. You prove it. Edgar is restored from the ill temper he gave way to at your coming. I begin to be secure and tranquil, and you, restless to know us at peace, appear resolved on exciting a quarrel. Quarrel with Edgar, if you please, Heathcliff, and deceive his sister. You'll hit on exactly the most efficient method of revenging yourself on me." The conversation ceased. Mrs. Linton sat down by the fire, flushed and gloomy. The spirit which served her was growing intractable. She could neither lay nor control it. He stood on the hearth with folded arms, brooding on his evil thoughts, and in this position I left them to seek the master, who was wondering what kept Catherine below so long. "Ellen," said he, when I entered, "have you seen your mistress?" "Yes, she's in the kitchen, sir," I answered. She's sadly put out by Mr. Heathcliff's behavior, and, indeed, I do think it's time to arrange his visits on another footing. There's harm in being too soft, and now it's come to this." And I related the scene in the court, and, as near as I dared, the whole subsequent dispute. I fancied it could not be very prejudicial to Mrs. Linton, unless she made it so afterward, by assuming the defensive for her guest. Edgar Linton had difficulty in hearing me to the close. His first words revealed that he did not clear his wife of blame. "This is insufferable," he exclaimed. "It is disgraceful that she should own him for a friend and force his company on me. Call me 2 men out of the hall, Ellen. Catherine shall linger no longer to argue with the low ruffian. I have humored her enough." He descended, and, bidding the servants wait in the passage, went, followed by me, to the kitchen. Its occupants had recommenced their angry discussion. Mrs. Linton, at least, was scolding with renewed vigor. Heathcliff had moved to the window and hung his head, somewhat cowed by her violent rating apparently. He saw the master first, and made a hasty motion that she should be silent, which she obeyed abruptly on discovering the reason of his intimation. "How is this?" said Linton, addressing her. "What notion of propriety must you have to remain here after the language which has been held to you by that blackguard? I suppose because it is his ordinary talk you think nothing of it. You are habituated to his baseness, and perhaps imagine I can get used to it too." "Have you been listening at the door, Edgar?" asked the mistress, in a tone particularly calculated to provoke her husband, implying both carelessness and contempt of his irritation. Heathcliff, who had raised his eyes at the former speech, gave a sneering laugh at the latter, on purpose, it seemed, to draw Mr. Linton's attention to him. He succeeded, but Edgar did not mean to entertain him with any high flights of passion. "I have been so far forbearing with you, sir," he said quietly, "not that I was ignorant of your miserable, degraded character, but I felt you were only partly responsible for that. And Catherine, wishing to keep up your acquaintance, I acquiesced, foolishly. Your presence is a moral poison that would contaminate the most virtuous. For that cause, and to prevent worse consequences, I shall deny you hereafter admission into this house, and give notice now that I require your instant departure. 3 minutes' delay will render it involuntary and ignominious." Heathcliff measured the height and breadth of the speaker with an eye full of derision. "Cathy, this lamb of yours threatens like a bull," he said. "It is in danger of splitting its skull against my knuckles. By God, Mr. Linton, I'm mortally sorry that you are not worth knocking down." My master glanced toward the passage, and signed me to fetch them in, who had no intention of hazarding a personal encounter. I obeyed the hint, but Mrs. Linton, suspecting something, followed, and when I attempted to call them, she pulled me back, slammed the door to, and locked it. "Fair means," she said, in answering to her husband's look of angry surprise. "If you have not the courage to attack him, make an apology or allow yourself to be beaten. It will correct you of feigning more valor than you possess. No, I'll swallow the key before you shall get it. I'm delightfully rewarded for my kindness to each. After constant indulgence of one's weak nature and the other's bad one, I earn, for thanks, 2 samples of blind ingratitude, stupid to absurdity. Edgar, I was defending you and yours, and I wish Heathcliff may flog you sick for daring to think an evil thought of me." It did not need the medium of a flogging to produce that effect on the master. He tried to wrest the key from Catherine's grasp, and for safety she flung it into the hottest part of the fire, whereupon Mr. Edgar was taken with a nervous trembling, and his countenance grew deadly pale. For his life he could not avert that access of emotion. Mingled anguish and humiliation overcame him completely. He leant on the back of a chair and covered his face. "Oh, heavens! In old days this would win you knighthood," exclaimed Mrs. Linton. "We are vanquished! We are vanquished! Heathcliff would as soon lift a finger at you as the king would march his army against a colony of mice. Cheer up, you shan't be hurt. Your type is not a lamb, it's a sucking leveret." "I wish you joy of the milk-blooded coward, Cathy," said her friend. "I compliment you on your taste, and that is the slavering, shivering thing you preferred to me. I would not strike him with my fist, but I'd kick him with my foot and experience considerable satisfaction. Is he weeping, or is he going to faint for fear? The fellow approached and gave the chair on which Linton rested a push. He'd better have kept his distance. My master quickly sprang erect and struck him full on the throat a blow that would have leveled a slighter man. It took his breath for a minute, and while he choked, Mr. Linton walked out by the back door into the yard and from thence to the front entrance. "There, you've done with coming here," cried Catherine. "Get away now. He'll return with a brace of pistols and half a dozen assistants. If he did overhear us, of course, he'd never forgive you. You've played me an ill turn, Heathcliff. But go, make haste. I'd rather see Edgar at bay than you." "Do you suppose I'm going with that blow burning in my gullet?" he thundered. "By hell, no. I'll crush his ribs in like a rotten hazelnut before I cross the threshold. If I don't floor him now, I shall murder him sometime. So, as you value his existence, let me get at him." "He is not coming," I interposed, framing a bit of a lie. "There's the coachman and the two gardeners. You'll surely not wait to be thrust into the road by them. Each has a bludgeon, and Master will very likely be watching from the parlor windows to see that they fulfill his orders." The gardeners and coachman were there, but Linton was with them. They had already entered the court. Heathcliff, on second thoughts, resolved to avoid a struggle against the three underlings. He seized the poker, smashed the lock from the inner door, and made his escape as they tramped in. Mrs. Linton, who was very much excited, bid me accompany her upstairs. She did not know my share in contributing to the disturbance, and I was anxious to keep her in ignorance. "I'm nearly distracted, Nellie," she exclaimed, throwing herself on the sofa. "1,000 Smith's hammers are beating in my head. Tell Isabella to shun me. This uproar is owing to her, and should she or anyone else aggravate my anger at present, I shall get wild. And Nellie, say to Edgar, if you see him again tonight, that I am in danger of being seriously ill. I wish it may prove true. He has startled and distressed me shockingly. I want to frighten him. Besides, he might come and begin a string of abuses or complainings. I'm certain I should recriminate, and God knows where we should end. Will you do so, my good Nellie? You are aware that I am no way blamable in this matter. What possessed him to turn listener? Heathcliff's talk was outrageous after you left us, but I could soon have diverted him from Isabella, and the rest meant nothing. Now, all is dashed wrong by the fool's craving to hear evil of self that haunts some people like a demon. Had Edgar never gathered our conversation, he would never have been the worse for it. Really, when he opened on me in that unreasonable tone of displeasure after I had scolded Heathcliff till I was hoarse for him, I did not care hardly what they did to each other, especially as I felt that however the scene closed, we should all be driven asunder for nobody knows how long. Well, if I cannot keep Heathcliff for my friend, if Edgar will be mean and jealous, I'll try to break their hearts by breaking my own. That will be a prompt way of finishing all when I am pushed to extremity. But it's a deed to be reserved for a forlorn hope. I'd not take Linton by surprise with it. To this point he has been discreet in dreading to provoke me. You must represent the peril of quitting that policy, and remind him of my passionate temper, verging, when kindled, on frenzy. I wish you could dismiss that apathy out of your countenance, and look rather more anxious about me." The stolidity with which I received these instructions was, no doubt, rather exasperating, for they were delivered in perfect sincerity. But I believed a person who could plan the turning of her fits of passion to account beforehand might, by exerting her will, manage to control herself tolerably even while under their influence. And I did not wish to frighten her husband, as she said, and multiply his annoyances for the purpose of serving her selfishness. Therefore I said nothing when I met the master coming toward the parlor, but I took the liberty of turning back to listen whether they would resume their quarrel together. He began to speak first. "Remain where you are, Catherine," he said, without any anger in his voice, but with much sorrowful despondency. "I shall not stay. I am neither come to wrangle nor to be reconciled, but I wish just to learn whether, after this evening's events, you intend to continue your intimacy with—" "Oh, for mercy's sake!" interrupted the mistress, stamping her foot. For mercy's sake, let us hear no more of it now. Your cold blood cannot be worked into a fever. Your veins are full of ice water, but mine are boiling, and the sight of such chillness makes them dance. To get rid of me, answer my question, persevered Mr. Linton. You must answer it, and that violence does not alarm me. I have found that you can be as stoical as anyone when you please. Will you give up Heathcliff hereafter, or will you give up me? It is impossible for you to be my friend and his at the same time, and I absolutely require to know which you choose. I require to be let alone, exclaimed Catherine furiously. I demand it. Don't you see I can scarcely stand? Edgar, you... Leave me. She rung the bell till it broke with a twang. I entered leisurely. It was enough to try the temper of a saint, such senseless, wicked rages. There she lay, dashing her head against the arm of the sofa and grinding her teeth, so that you might fancy she would crash them to splinters. Mr. Linton stood looking at her in sudden compunction and fear. He told me to fetch some water. She had no breath for speaking. I brought a glass full, and as she would not drink, I sprinkled it on her face. In a few seconds she stretched herself out stiff and turned up her eyes, while her cheeks, at once blanched and livid, assumed the aspect of death. Linton looked terrified. There is nothing in the world the matter, I whispered. I did not want him to yield, though I could not help being afraid in my heart. She has blood on her lips, he said, shuddering. Never mind, I answered tartly, and I told him how she had resolved, previous to his coming, on exhibiting a fit of frenzy. I incautiously gave the account aloud, and she heard me, for she started up, her hair flying over her shoulders, her eyes flashing, the muscles of her neck and arms standing out preternaturally. I made up my mind for broken bones at least, but she only glared about her for an instant and then rushed from the room. The master directed me to follow. I did to her chamber door. She hindered me from going farther by securing it against me. As she never offered to descend to breakfast next morning, I went to ask whether she would have some carried up. No, she replied peremptorily. The same question was repeated at dinner and tea, and again on the morrow after, and received the same answer. Mr. Linton, on his part, spent his time in the library and did not inquire concerning his wife's occupations. Isabella and he had had an hour's interview, during which he tried to elicit from her some sentiment of proper horror for Heathcliff's advances, but he could make nothing of her evasive replies, and was obliged to close the examination unsatisfactorily, adding, however, a solemn warning that if she were so insane as to encourage that worthless suitor, it would dissolve all bonds of relationship between herself and him. All right, folks, that is the end of Chapter 11. We will pick up next time with Chapter 12 in Volume 1 of Wuthering Heights. Thank you so much for coming along with me. And until we meet again next time, please have a great rest of the day or night, whenever and wherever you are. Take care out there.